Good morning. On behalf of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's webinar is entitled Rise and Resilience, Sharing Our Stories, and is being broadcast live today, July 25th, 2024. Before we get started, I would like to thank our corporate sponsors for their support on hosting events such as this. They support us not because they want their logos up on a screen, but they support the cause, which is to effect positive change in the workers' compensation industry through networking, mentoring, supporting, and collaboration. The Alliance is inclusive of all professionals in workers' compensation, regardless of career stage, with the belief that we can all learn from and support each other. Our theme this year is Ignite Your Potential. Please be sure to head to the Alliance website for all upcoming events. We're excited to host webinars, collaboration sessions, and in-person events throughout the year as we provide resources and speakers to help you ignite your potential. Be sure to check back on our website for registration details, and if you can't make an event, don't worry. We record all events and make available on our website. The Alliance is growing every year, and last year was no exception. We continue to grow and launch new chapters this year, so please be sure to connect with your local ambassador for upcoming events. If you would like more details on the program, please check out a replay of our January 25th webinar. Change is preceded by trust. It is through acceptance and inclusion that trust will be formed and positive impact will occur. The Alliance is committed to creating a safe space in the workers' compensation industries for women of diverse backgrounds and experiences through a shared culture that integrates various perspectives. This is who we are and who we will be. The time to do better and be better is now. The Alliance understands that diversity is a journey that will take time to make meaningful changes for our organization, its followers, and its supporters. We will be intentional in making progress along our key pillars of change. Learn more about the Alliance's DEI initiatives by checking out a replay of our February 29th panel discussion with the DEI committee. Turning to today's webinar, we're so excited to bring you to today's webinar because it keeps with our theme of resilience from the incredibly moving Rise and Resilience speaker event we had on June 6th. Today, Shanna Baritot will share her story of losing her sister to a lifetime of addiction and mental illness 6 years ago. There's such a horrible stigma around both of these topics, but we need to talk about the things we're going through. And sharing her story has led to some incredible connections in Shanna's life, both personally and professionally. So please join us for this incredibly vulnerable and impactful session as Shanna shares her story and how to show up through it all and how to continue moving forward. Shanna is a national account manager in the account management at Optum Workers' Comp and Auto No Fault. We know you will absolutely love and be moved by this session from Shanna, so please utilize the chat feature throughout the webinar to engage with her and your fellow members about what is sure to inspire you today. Thank you for the time you're spending with us today, and we hope you enjoy this webinar.
Good morning, everybody. I think no matter what time zone you're in, it's probably, I'm pretty sure, morning somewhere except for perhaps Italy. It's one of my favorite places on earth. I'm Shanna Baritot, and I want to say thank you to Lori for the intro, to the Alliance for letting me share my story, to Dion and Mary Jo and Nina for their sharing of their stories last month, which led to this. And I'm incredibly grateful. I'm very honored to be here. I trust that somebody is going to speak up or put something in the chat if you can't hear me. So I'm going to assume that we're good. So I hope everybody is okay with a very personal share and, you know, really talking about really difficult things. My goal today, and there's no promises whatsoever, but my goal is not to cry. So if I do, I'm just going to say sorry right now, but you're going to get all of me, which I realize is not, that's not common, and it makes people uncomfortable. And you know what, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but I prefer coffee anyways, so that's okay. But I do this actually very intentionally because my sister suffered from a lifetime, and I mean a lifetime, of addiction and mental illness. And these are things that are so deeply stigmatized, and they stay in the dark. And when we leave them in the dark, they are hidden and shameful. And you know what? There's nothing shameful about any of it. And I firmly believe in talking about these things. I think it's important. And I think the more that we can remove that stigma, I have asthma, and I'm going to tell you if I have to go get my inhaler, not today, obviously. But if, someone has diabetes and you talk about your insulin, it doesn't make anyone uncomfortable because it shouldn't, because it's part of life. Well, addiction and mental illness, unfortunately, for some people, is really a prevalent part of life. And if it is, it tends to be the biggest part of life. And what I have found in doing this is that I'm a little bit blown away by how deeply this is touching even in the most far-reaching of places. And the common theme every single time is that this touches everyone. And maybe not directly, but someone you know or know of and love. And, I really hope for you that it's not a really close person. Um, Please feel free. I am terrible, terrible, terrible at multitasking. If you actually know me, and I don't even want to know who I know that's actually on this because, but I'm grateful to all of you that are here today. If you know me in person, you know that I can't multitask to save my life. I am terrible. I'm good at things. It's not one of them. So please feel free to interact in the chat. Lori so kindly said that she would, if there's something that, needs to be said out loud, interrupt me at any time. Shauna, you were talking a lot. Wouldn't be the first time. But please feel free to interject. I wish this was in person and we can have an actual conversation, and maybe that'll happen down the road. But feel free to interact. And I'm going to try really hard to save time for any questions or discussion that you want to have in the chat, at the end of this. Just know that I may not be able to multitask and see it while we're talking. So my apologies in advance. So all of that said, I'm grateful for this and for you being here, every single person that is here. And I would say that my story really starts, I had a normal-ish childhood, ish. Normal is a washing machine setting. That's about it. Um, but there were times when I can look back and say, when I was a little kid, things were okay, things were good, and there's good things that I hang on to. But really, kind of my life fell apart a lot, actually, when I was um, I was 11 and my sister was 14. Malika was 3 years older than me, 2 years and 10 months older than me. And our dad left when I was 11 and she was 14. And I would say in that year that preceded that was kind of a hot mess. So, the two parent household, which is such an uncommon thing these days, at least a lot of places, um, it was that for a minute. Maybe not great, but it was that for a minute. And then when my dad left, it completely. I mean, he left in just taking the match, throwing it behind him, started a new family, replaced us with his new family, no question. And the kicker was he actually blamed it on my sister. I distinctly remember that. Which, can you imagine being 13 and a half, just about 14, and carrying that burden when in reality he had a woman that was pregnant with his next child that became his whole family. And I just, it was right around that time that my sister was diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia, which, from what I understand now as an adult, that's a very common thing to rear its ugly head at around that age because it has something to do with hormones and puberty. I don't remember the science. I remember, reading about it over the years. Um, but what I don't remember, because it didn't happen, was her actually getting treatment for it and it being something where we can work with this and we can manage it. It became my sister being just out there struggling, suffering, and just one end of one extreme to the other was the norm. There was very, very little calm, and there was very little. peace in our house. In addition to, when my dad left. And frankly, that was 35 years ago. And even to this day, if you bring up my dad to my mom, she still spews nothing but hatred. It's crazy to me that she's so it made it really difficult to have a relationship with him for either of us, and certainly not at all with my sister because of the way he left with her. But I will say that that actually informed who I would never be as a parent, and I would never do that to my children because essentially you're making them choose. But really, very prevalent around that time. I remember when I was a kid, I used to have to wake up my sister for school, at times just because she didn't get up or whatever. And I remember opening the door to her room, and the moment I opened the door, all I could smell was the alcohol. She was 14 at the time, and this smell is a really pervasive smell. I'm not talking about when someone has alcohol on their breath, like they just had a beer or whatever, even hung over the next day. I'm not even talking about that. This is actually a really pervasive smell that, I don't know, it's something to do with the liver, but it's in someone's pores, and it's a very distinct and very pungent and awful smell that even now as an adult, when I get a whiff of it, I'm like, whoa, instantly takes me back, and it's like, hmm, okay, that's not okay. And she had it when she was 14. If that gives you a sense of how deep into her addiction she was already starting to be. And, which I understand now too, 100,000% was self medicating because she certainly wasn't being treated for the things that she was actually diagnosed with. I'm sure there's a myriad of reasons for that. That said, she was even back then. And I remember holidays, oh my gosh, holidays were punctuated with screaming matches because once my dad left, he was just gone. He was out of the picture. So it was just my mom and my sister and I. And every holiday, when I was a kid, we would go to my grandparents, and I loved, oh my gosh. I have a crazy dysfunction. We'll talk about dysfunction. We put the fun in dysfunctional, let me tell you. But I loved the warmth of my grandma. Like, she was such, I adored my grandma. She was amazing. And so holidays there were this big sprawling, crazy uncles and aunts and a couple of cousins that were close in age to Malika and I. So it was amazing. And that was, Christmas and Easter, and, we were Polish, so, whatever. And actually, we were a mutt: Polish, Ukrainian, Italian, and German, if you really want to know. So we celebrated different things, is where I'm going with this. Um, but holidays, it would be a screaming match. And at that point, my sister was up in the attic, the third story. And she would be screaming from upstairs to my mom, who was screaming downstairs up at her. It was chaos, and ultimately would cancel, holidays. It was like, what? So, and I'm the 11-year-old that just wanted to go see my cousins. And it was just like, I mean, sometimes it didn't happen, but more often than not, it always happened like that. It's just sometimes we would still go. Sometimes we would go without my sister, which even as a kid, I'm like, we can't, that's not, it's what, you can't do that. It was just so that, which I now again understand that this was my sister not knowing how to deal with being around family and being around people and feeling judged for, all the things. And she was running away all the time. And at one point, she ended up in a foster home. My mom put her in a foster home. And I remember having to go see her there for Christmas that year. And it was like, I can't even fathom. And I still, because my mom, she's a compulsive liar. That's a whole nother conversation. But I still don't know exactly what led to that. I just remember, even as a kid, going, this is not okay. I was home. It wasn't that she wasn't able to take care of us. She just couldn't deal with my sister and what she had, which again, my sister couldn't help it. But then there was a layer of rebellion and, all the things, which, that comes from self hatred, friends. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. But man, like, hopefully this resonates with somebody, because I'm not hoping that you had the same, but just I can't be this far gone from normal. Maybe I am. I don't know. But anyways, she tried rehab. I can't tell you how many times over the years she tried. She tried. Sometimes inpatient, sometimes outpatient, sometimes, but she tried. And it just, you can see her story in pictures when I look back that way. So, bigger picture, stepping back. One of my most favorite pictures of Malika is from my younger one's christening. So, this would have been 19 years ago. And she was, oh, my sister, you should know, she was the pretty one. Like when we were together, just boys didn't even see anybody else. She was gorgeous, beautiful, wicked sense of humor, like vicious sense of humor. I loved it. She would make up these stupid songs about like shoes and broccoli that made no sense, but she was amazing. And she had this light that just, I swear, she attracted people to her. So when she was good, oh my gosh, she was amazing. And the aunt she was to my sons, unbelievable. But when she wasn't okay, she would go dark, off the grid. And you can see in the pictures that, the first time her nose was broken, her boyfriend Kyle at the time, who was an abusive piece of garbage, that we couldn't get her away from him because you know what? She felt like that's what she deserved. So she'd always go back and he would do it again. And you could see in the photographs how many times her nose had been broken. And it was just like, it would break my heart because if she could see herself the way I did, and really everybody did, like, oh, you just can't even fathom, like, how do you not see this? But I also understand how she can't see it. You just can't. And she would go off the grid and she would use burner phones. There was times, stretches of time, when I had no idea even how to get a hold of my sister. um, she would just disappear, and because she didn't want to be found. So, but when she showed up in a big way. And even despite all of the demons that she had, oh, she had so many. But even despite that, she never failed to let you know if she loved you, oh, fiercely, fiercely. And if she didn't, good luck to you, because she let you know that too. Like she was out loud. She was amazing, amazing. Um, she was on methadone in a day treatment program for addiction when she first entered the hospital on August 25th of 2017. When I walked into her hospital room, she did not recognize me. And frankly, I almost couldn't even see her through it. I couldn't, it was hard. She was there, but she had changed so much. Her nose had been, broken again fairly recently. So she had bruises and her face was swollen because of she had developed an abscess at the top of her cervical spine, which is back here at the base of her brain. And it was from using a dirty IV needle. And when I asked the doctors what it was that she would, not that it mattered, right, at that point, but when I asked the doctors what she was on, he just said everything. And I said, so, and I started, and he just goes, yeah, yeah. And he goes, you can stop guessing everything, Shauna. I said, okay, so what is this? And he said, we don't know what we're dealing with yet. We know about that. We did an MRI. So they put her on a wide spectrum of antibiotics to try to capture whatever it was that she was dealing with. And after just a couple of days, she slipped into a coma. And she ended up staying in that coma for months. Yeah, months. And the diagnoses, every day I would meet with her team, and I mean, she had infectious disease because it was an IV drug use and what they were doing. She had, a physiologist, she had social worker, she had caseworker, she had every single specialty. Immunology was just every specialty. So in the ICU, and they threw out terms that I now know intimately that I never wanted to know about, but something like ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, MMSA. I've heard of MRSA, but apparently there's also MMSA, which is another bacterial infection. So she was being treated for ARDS, MMSA, MRSA. She developed endocarditis, which is a terrible, terrible thing to happen with the heart. Um, she just everything going on, and she's in a coma. And I remember sitting in her hospital room, and I think that was quite possibly the loneliest I have ever felt in my life. Because I would sit next to her and watch her fever climb, and she was laying on a cooling blanket with a cooling blanket on top of her. And I would just sit there and watch it sweat onto the floor. And the nurses actually, because I couldn't keep it straight in my head how to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, and for my sweet, sweet European friend, I know he's cringing right now because Roz knows. I should know Celsius really well. I don't. They did a conversion chart on the wall for me so that every day I can watch and translate what her fever was. And it never, ever, a good day was when it got down to 102, and it was terrifying. And my sister had 765 friends on Facebook, and my friends, I can count on one hand total the number that I saw all of those months when she was in the hospital, because that wasn't real. Those were not real connections. So I would sit there and watch her fever. And the doctor told me at one point that they had to replace the bacteria that started and what caused the coma. Let me just back up really briefly. This started with the cervical spine, ended up attaching to a valve in her heart, so that every single time her heart beat, it scattered bacteria throughout her bloodstream. So the doctor said there's no way she's going to ever come out of this coma, or definitely not survive, unless we can replace that valve in her heart. But they can't take her into surgery because her fever wouldn't come down, and they needed it below 101 degrees for 24 hours. And that hadn't happened since she slipped into the coma. Some days were a lot higher than that. So he said, finally, after weeks of this, he said, Shanna, there are studies that show that long-term antibiotic use, and by the way, they had to do a tracheostomy. I always thought it was tracheotomy, but her specific was tracheostomy because she wasn't breathing or swallowing or anything. So he said there's studies that show that sometimes that'll artificially elevate the temperature in a patient who's in a state like this. So almost as a Hail Mary, if you will, he said, we're going to try to stop everything. And I said, well, I mean, that's all that was keeping her alive to the point where she was. And he said, I know, but she's not going to be able to stay like this. So they stopped everything. And I can't even. But it worked. And by, I want to say, a day later, her fever dropped enough below, and I think he got it down to 100.5. And he said, all right, we're going to go. We're taking her. This is going to be the day. And he told me very kindly and very gently that this surgery is risky in a healthy, robust patient. And he said, your sister is far from that. So he told me just not to expect her to survive, but they would do everything that they could. And man, true to her wickedly rebellious fighting spirit, she survived that surgery, which I think was out of spite. And I got my sister back, which I can't even tell you I know now it took me a minute to get to this place, but that was a gift because it had been, when I say years, I wish I was exaggerating, years since I had had a conversation where my sister was clear eyed, completely clean, all the way sober, wasn't nodding off, wasn't on some prescription numbness. Years. And I got my sister back. And in the months that followed, while she was in the hospital, because she was in the hospital for 4 months, I got my sister back. And we had some of the most beautiful conversations about our dysfunctional childhood and our mom. She's the only one who knows my whole history because she has the same one. And we would talk about everything. And it was amazing. It was amazing. And while she was getting healthier and healthier, she started making plans again for her future, which she hadn't been able to be clear eyed enough to do since I don't even know how long. And she decided after all the time that she spent in the hospital that she was going to go back to school for medicine, and she wanted to be an ICU nurse because of how beautifully they took care of her. And she had decided, rehab, absolutely. I met with her social work team on it felt like daily, but it had to have been pretty close. All the talks of rehab, all of it fell away when she was finally discharged. And she was in the hospital for about 4 months, just over 4 months, and she was discharged right around Christmas of that year. And she went off the grid again because you know what? There was no rehab, nothing that they followed through with. They said that because now she was on Suboxone, to treat the opioid piece of her addiction, there wasn't any long-term facilities. She had left foot drop from nerve damage from being in bed for so long, and she needed physical rehab to get back to strength again because of how compromised her whole body had been. And they said they couldn't find a rehab that would take her on Suboxone, a long-term, facility where she could actually physically rehab and then also deal with the recovery piece of it. So they didn't discharge her to anything other than apparently my mom's house, which has a whole level of darkness all its own. So it didn't, when she stopped returning my calls and texts and she went off the grid again, it was like, all right, here we go again. So it wasn't entirely surprising when the hospital called me on May 11th of 2018, because in the 4 months that she was in the hospital, she made me her healthcare proxy because she didn't want our mom, having anything to do with her healthcare and recovery, for really obvious reasons. Um, so they called me directly, not my mom. The hospital called me. And she was admitted with a fever of 109 degrees. And I'm just going to say that again because I didn't know that was possible. They told me on the phone she had a fever of 109 degrees. And I remember when my boys were babies, creeping up to 103.7, 103.8. That's alarming because now you watch for seizures and you call the doctor and maybe urgent care. And I didn't know it was humanly, physically possible to have a fever that high. And when I got to the hospital, the doctor told me, one, that it was our mom that dropped her off and left her there. And two, he brought me behind the doctor's station in the ICU. And he said that he showed me the MRI that he had up on the screen. And that glorious, gorgeous heart valve where she had a second chance at life, that porcine heart valve. She tried to grab it and she just didn't know how. So, not surprisingly, she reinfected again, IV drug use, the new heart valve. And this time the bacteria had spread to her brain. And he showed me the MRI that was scattered with white And he said that was the bacteria, and she had had a stroke at some point. He could show me that too. And he said, John, I don't know. I don't know if she's going to come out of the coma this time. And again, true to Malika's rebellious, fighting, wickedly amazing spirit, she did. But this time, the light in her eyes, the only way I can describe it is that it dimmed. Like she didn't come all the way back that time. And she started to get better, and she started getting a little healthier and all the things that they were doing. And when I went up to see her on June 5th of 2018, I can honestly say, and I would still say this today, even if things didn't happen the way they did, it was one of the best visits we ever had. Sorry, I told you I'm going to try not to cry. She we talked about the stupidest things. I think Desperate Housewives, she's like, do you watch that? I'm like, no, I don't watch that, it's garbage. She goes, I know, but it's so addictive, you really should. And she goes, what the hell else am I supposed to do while I'm in here? I'm like, fair enough. So we sat there and we watched it a little bit. So stupid. And we were talking about just a little bit of everything. And I remember I can see her. She was swinging her feet on her bed like a little kid. It was so stinking cute. And she had just shaved her. She had the nurse actually shave her hair, so it was like really, really short, like just this cute little, not a buzz cut, like a tiny bit longer, so it had a little bit of wave, but like super, and it looked amazing. And she's like, "You think so?" But because of malnutrition and all this, the garbage that she put her body through, like she was losing clumps of hair from stress. So she finally just like, and it looked amazing. I mean, she pulled it off like I would look like a turtle if I shaved my hair. She looked amazing. And so we were talking about that. And so like I did every single day. I'm like, what can I get you? What can I bring you tomorrow? And she kind of thought about it for a minute, and she goes, nail polish. I need nail polish. She goes, have you seen my nails? I'm like, all right, I got you. What color nail polish would you like, or do you just want to bring you a variety? Almost without missing a beat, she gets this like mischievous look in her eyes, and she goes, hot pink. I burst out laughing, and I was like, did you just say hot pink? Because she didn't. In hindsight, I do remember she actually dyed her hair hot pink when she was like 15, and my mom wanted to kill her. That's another. So I'm like, I never really noticed that theme that she actually really did like hot pink. So I was like, and she goes, is that too much? And I was like, no, like that is you through and through. Yes, I don't know where I'm gonna find. I will get you hot pink nail polish. And it was awesome. We had a great visit. And it was after midnight that night that I was woken up. What's the past tense of that? Awoken. Let's be classy. By someone banging on my front door and my dog losing his mind. And it was a friend of my mom's. And she just said, you need to come to the hospital right now. And she just turned and left. And I woke up instantly, like that, all the way awake. And I just went and just threw something, whatever, to go out, And I grabbed my phone. I had seven missed calls from the hospital. I had slept through. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm trying not to cry. I barely remember the drive. I just know it was fast. I don't know how I didn't get pulled over. Thankfully now my best boyfriend friend, my best girlfriend is for life and she's in North Carolina, but my best boyfriend friend is a police chief. I didn't know him yet then. It would have helped if I got pulled over, but now then I was on my own. We got to the hospital and the unit was dark because it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And the nurse waved me back. Shit, sorry. Oh, and for swearing, sorry. My sister had died a couple minutes before I got there. And I will always believe it was between those missed calls that if I had just gotten the first one. But there are two things that I hold on to about that night that took me a minute to get there. But there are two things that I hold on to really tightly on the hardest days. One, I don't believe in coincidences at all. You may call it faith, you may call it whatever you want. There are no coincidences, my friends. Not at all. And it's a whole nother conversation, but I could come up with a lot of really huge, crazy examples to just prove that it's now just a part of my understanding is that there are no coincidences. So when I came in the room that night, they had a hospital chaplain there, which I guess they do. I don't know that. And he turned as soon as I walked in and he just bear hugged. And when I was done completely falling apart, and he kind of held me back enough to say, "Are you okay?" And to see if I was ready to go and walk over to. It was my older son Dylan's childhood friend's dad. And I had known Cliff for years. And I knew he was going to school for ministry a couple years ago when the boys played t-ball together and all the things. But he was the hospital chaplain that night. Why it was Cliff, why it was that hospital, why it was my sister's room, I'll never understand. But that was amazing that it was Cliff that was there as the hospital chaplain. And my sister, for as long as I could remember, my sister used to, even when we were kids, like she actually like she almost had, it was very thin right here in her eyebrows. Don't look closely at my eyebrows because I need to do them, but whatever. And for the men on this, yes, women do their eyebrows. Don't judge. We just do. You don't need to know that. But like she would worry at, it was like when she was thinking, it was a self-soothing comfort thing. And she would always, and she had this little wrinkle that was like right here on her right eyebrow. Now, all the times that I would sit with her when she was sleeping or when she was in a coma, all of those weeks, even then she had this little furrow. She had that wrinkle. Like even at that point, she couldn't just relax and find peace. And for the first time that I ever remember, it was gone that night. And I'd like to think that the demons that she had been running from her whole adult life it finally left her alone. And I can honestly say that brings me such peace. I can't even tell you. It's been 6 years now. Last month was the 6th anniversary. And there's things that I still wish I knew what I could have done differently and what I could have said differently. And the hardest thing for me is that I still don't know because I feel like we did everything we could and I still don't know. That sucks. I just know that I love my people out loud. Just so much. And it's because of my sister, and my family is so dysfunctional. My stepfather, who was the man that raised me, he committed suicide a few years ago because he had his own demons that he couldn't talk about. My sister was never able to talk about and face hers, and so she just fell into a lifetime of addiction. And addiction sucks the life out of a room. All the light, all the self-love, all the self-esteem, all the connections that you have with people, it kills all of it. And she lived like she believed that she deserved, and I just wish she could have seen differently. And her boyfriend, actually, Miguel, who was really sweet. They had been together a couple years, for a couple years at that point. And he was really so sweet to the boys. Just such a he was a good man, but also very much an addict. And I don't know which of them drove the other. And it doesn't matter because they both slid downhill. They were each other's downfall, where they were both functional to a point, but they were each other's downfall. And Miguel died 8 months after she did of a very similar, his heart also for the same things that he was never able to get away from. So what I know though, and the way I've gone forward, is these kinds of conversations that are deeply personal, more than you probably know about a lot of people, but I'm not ashamed of any of it. I'm deeply proud of my sister. Incredibly sad that she had to go through all the things that she went through, but she was one of the strongest people I know because of what she went through. It's just she couldn't shine that light inside of herself. And I talk openly and freely with my sons who are now 19 and 22. Freely, nothing is off the table, because where we never talked about it growing up and she never got treatment, we talk about suicide because of their poppy that was their grandpa. We talk about mental illness, we talk about addiction, we talk about therapy, we talk about all the things that we should talk about like this every day. There's nothing off the table, nothing. And when I'm wrong, if I get, and I kind of like I will come back and tell them I'm sorry. I was having a bad day that had nothing to do with you, and I'm sorry I said, whatever, which is usually a minor infraction. Those are two different words. I never understood how to use either. That's a different thing. But we talk about it daily and regularly. And I can honestly say my family is small. Like, my family now consists of, you ready for the list? It's lengthy. My sons and myself. That's it. That's the end of the story. So the friends, even though I've always struggled to connect with people and to develop close friendships, the few people, and I can really count on one hand, the number of people that I'm very close with, I love my people fiercely, and I make sure they know it. I will make it weird. I will never not make it weird, and I'll never apologize for that, because I think that is my family. That's my extended family now. And the connections that I've made with people just from having these conversations, because I've spoken a couple times now with college classes, the students that stayed back to talk to me. There's a the Gates Police Department. I'm here in New York. The police chief, who just since retired actually last year, the police chief started a Gates to Recovery program, which is for people dealing with addiction, and so they have some place to go while they're waiting to get into a rehab. They have a van for Gates to Recovery, and it says right on the van, it's in my family too. And this van is plastered with photographs of people that have lost their lives to addiction. And they're young and vibrant and amazing. And I saw them at an event that I went to hear the speaker talk about addiction. And I reached out to see if they needed volunteers, which they did, which led to Chief Van Brederode, Jimmy Van Brederode, putting my sister's picture on that van, which is the highest honor, because look at her, talk about her. These are the actual faces of addiction and mental illness. And no coincidences, Jimmy has since become a personal friend. He actually texted me yesterday with some drama that he's dealing with. He has since retired, and I now play bagpipes with Jimmy in a police pipes band, which is just, I'm unbelievable. What? Who does that? Like, amazing. And speaking of that coincidence that led to that connection, one of my drummers, one of my 3 favorite people in the band, um, reached out to me last week or 2 ago, and a friend of his actually died of a drug overdose. And this man was 38 years old with 2 babies at home. And Derek asked me if I would play solo Amazing Grace on pipes for his funeral with him on drum. And it was unbelievably an honor. And I think I'm not the best piper in the band. We've had pipers that have been playing for years, but he chose me, and I'll never understand why, but I'm grateful. So grateful for that. Um, there's been some amazing connections, but one that I want to say really quick. Um, long story, sidebar, different conversation, but my then husband and I got out of debt. We became debt free after 5 years, 3 months, 5 days, who's counting. Paid off the house, every ounce of anything we owe to everyone. As a way to celebrate when that finally happened, when we were all the way debt free, we had a house concert with one of my favorite singers. His name is Sean Rao. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him. I always thought it was Rowe until I met him, and it's Rao. But there was a song that Sean does. It's called The Very First Snow, if you ever want to look it up. And one of the times when I was leaving the ICU for an especially terrible day, for my sister when she was especially sick, this song came on Pandora, and I had never heard it, but I actually had to pull over because I fell apart completely. And after my sister died, I hadn't been able to listen to that song in years. So when Sean was now fast forward to in my kitchen, getting ready, setting up for the party, the debt free house party, he asked me if there's anything he wanted, me to play. And I was like, well, I would be so grateful if you would play, this one song. But if you don't mind, and please don't take it the wrong way, but there's one that I'm asking you not to play. And he goes, okay, well, that is a first, Shauna. Now I'm intrigued. So I told him about The Very First Snow, and we had, so there's maybe 20, 22, 25 people total with the boys, their girlfriends, couple friends that we had invited for this little kind of intimate house concert. And so in the midst of these people, Sean and I had this little, most beautiful bubble private conversation that no one could have even walked into, because he said, Shauna, do you know what that song is about? And I said, not at all. I know that it broke my heart and I have a hard time listening to it. He goes, that's about my sister Lisa. And I lost my sister when she was 43. And Malika was 43. And it was so connections. And there are no coincidences. And that is the takeaway that I'd like to tell you, that, the connections that I've made in the conversations with people have been beautiful and amazing. And just keep reaching out, because the light is where it stays dark and you don't talk about it. And we're all going through something. Every single one of us has something. But if you don't talk about it, it stays dark and shameful and hidden. And the connections that I've made from doing this, Missy, even LinkedIn, I see you, my friend. Unbelievable connections. So I'm sorry this went so long. I didn't mean to ramble, but thank you from the bottom of my heart for just letting me do this to the Alliance, and for everybody that's on this call. And if there's questions, please, Lori, if there's anything in particular, I'm going to try. I'm so sorry that I didn't mean to talk and ramble this long. I just don't know how to condense all of that, apparently. So if there's questions that I can answer, I'm here. So and Lori, again, please feel free to speak up. So, okay, does anyone have questions? Oh, you guys are amazing. Oh, you make me cry. No, Bob Clark, thank you. Addiction does not discriminate, my friend. It's terrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And I actually saw a TED Talk a couple years ago that I just wanted to say really quick. The woman posed the question, what if the opposite of addiction is not sobriety or being clean? What if the opposite of addiction is connection? And you know what? It is the opposite of addiction, because once you're disconnected because of whatever you're going through, it's easy to feel like you're the only one, you're alone, you're not. Oh my gosh. And if she was able to recognize that and see that and turn towards, instead of away from, and just keep stuffing down in private all of what she was dealing with. And you guys are amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. I cannot thank you. Oh, you guys are amazing. Ugh.
Shauna, I've finally
Lori, thank you.
so I've been able to compose myself, but I will not come on video.
I'm so sorry.
There's
I
one
try not to
question.
cry.
How did you become so resilient?
Oh, oh. Oh my gosh. Oh, and it's my friend Deborah. Hey, brah. Because she doesn't like to be called Debbie. Hi. um, God, I'm so glad I didn't know you guys were on this. I would have been self-conscious. Um, I don't know that I am resilient. I just know that I've struggled through resentment and anger. I joke with my friends. I don't know if you can see, but my earrings are black diamonds because I have a little black heart. Like if you only knew the stuff that I struggle with. But I don't believe in I believe in hope, and I am fueled by connections with people. And I one of my friends who has been in the fire service for he stopped by my house at I think 10:30 one evening, and he was never the type to just drop in. And do you know that that man stayed until almost 1 o'clock in the morning because he broke down at my kitchen table and just cried. And I kept him until, and my then husband too, he just kept him until he was sober enough to go home. He didn't want to stay. And the fact that someone sees me as a way to just let that person be who they are, that's resilience by definition is the ability to bounce back from setbacks. But I think resilience is just choosing every day and sometimes every minute of every day of moving forward and not hiding. And you know what? Some days my dog is the only thing that makes me happy because he's a lovable idiot and everything is best day ever for him. This stick, best stick he's ever had. I get up in the morning, he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's time for breakfast. This is amazing." Like he is sometimes that's what gets me going. And then, I'll take him for a walk through the woods, forest bathe. Has anyone ever forest bathe where you just walk and like it just every day you just keep choosing one foot in front of the other, and that's what you do. And you make connections with people. And when I review my clients opioid data, there's humans behind those numbers. I don't share them the personal side of this with them, but that's what I'm thinking of my sister when I'm telling them their opioid numbers and how they're doing, their program is doing. You connect with people, you just keep connecting and showing up and trying. And if you cannot get out of bed, then you know what, walk around your bedroom, maybe take a shower, just something, take a step, take another one, reach out to someone, get outside. You just keep trying. That's all I know. That's what works for me. I don't know what I just got in my mouth, sorry. Sorry, I'm trying to, and Lori, please, if there's any questions. You guys are amazing.
And no other questions, just everyone sharing all their love for you and making it weird like we're supposed to, right?
Make it weird, my friends, if you do nothing else. She had 765 friends on Facebook in 4 months, less than one hand, the people that sat with me or to come see her. And I was there so daily that I know I wasn't just missing them. Be real. Don't just send thoughts and prayers, which, yes, pray for someone. Absolutely. That's not what I mean. Don't just text thoughts and prayers. Or, you know what gets me? Don't say, "I miss you." Why? Why do you miss me? I have a friend in California that I go see as often as I can because there's planes that fly. And if you live in my neighborhood and you're saying, "I miss you," that's not real. I have no patience for not real connections. If you miss me, call me, text me. I have anxiety about talking on the phone. Ironic. I know I have clients that are national, but I hate talking on the phone. I do. I'm fine once I'm on the phone. Reach out to your people, connect with somebody. It's why I can count on one hand the number of people that I'm very close to. And man, I will always fertilize that garden because connect with your people and love them. And if you're thinking of a compliment, I stop strangers in airports to tell them I love their shoes because I believe in paying compliments out loud. And every single time I've ever done it, it stops them off like completely and catches them off guard. But you should see the change in their face. Because everybody's in their own head. Let your people know that you love them. I think that's how we move forward. We all have a story, but you guys seriously are
And very
amazing.
last question before we wrap it up. What is the name of your band and where do you play?
Oh my gosh. Um, I play currently with the Gates Keystone Police Pipes and Drums, and we actually honor fallen law enforcement. So the Cleveland police officer that was killed in the line of duty on July 4th, we were honored to actually play. We were invited by the Cleveland police, and we played with the Cleveland police and the Greater Buffalo Firefighters Pipes and Drums and the Syracuse Kilties, and we played them home. And honestly, I actually, one of the crazy connections on a work trip, I bring my patches. I don't know how well you can see that. I collect patches on every one of my work trips because I stop at a police and fire department on my off hours to just bring them a patch, trade a patch, thank them for their service. And listen, guys, fire especially has the best food recommendations because they're foodies. So I'll get great recommendations. One such trip led to an amazing connection with a Cincinnati police officer, a sheriff's office, who founded their pipes band like 20 some years ago, who became a friend, who then invited us to play in the Cincinnati Reds opening day parade. So my bestie in the band, my police chief buddy, the other police chief, Jimmy, who I play pipes with, who put my sister's picture on the van, connections, right? We the four and Jimmy's wife, we took a road trip to Cincinnati like little kids with so much candy we shouldn't have been allowed to buy. We took a road trip and we played in the Cincinnati Reds opening day parade. And it was one of the highlights of experiences in my life because of connections and paying a compliment to someone and just keep reaching out because you're letting the light in. And I don't even know if I answered your question. I don't even remember what the question was. So sorry. I hope that helped. You guys are amazing. I am so grateful. And if we ever do one of these in person, I am there because I would love to meet so many of you that are just, you guys are amazing. Amazing. And I'm sorry we actually went the full hour. I was going to give you time back, but I ramble. So thank you for letting me ramble. Thank you for letting me be here.